Hi, this is Andrew Strank from Strategic Planning Concepts in Tustin, California, and this is another one of our series of changes in the world of commercial real estate. Today we'd like to talk about food halls. There's a lot of transformation still going on in the world of commercial retail. There are a lot of dead and dying projects, and many of them have grasped at the concept of adding a food hall as a way of finding their way back to relevancy. Can this work? Well, yes, this can work sometimes under the right conditions. However, it's worth noting that food halls will not solve every vacancy issue or rescue every dying retail center, or even put a new one on the map. The gallery at 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica has failed. So did Union Market here at the District in Tustin, and the Union Market at Kaleidoscope in Mission Viejo. Those are just three quick examples. So the food hall is not a universal cure-all for the problems that may be challenging your particular shopping center. There is sort of a sense, I think, in my experience in the industry, kind of a thought process that food halls are a sexy solution that offers an immediate degree of cultural relevancy that many shopping centers happen to lack. But they're not a panacea for every owner and investor seeking a quick and easy solution to their woes. So let's talk about that today. Yes, there are successful food halls. One thinks of Chelsea Marketplace in New York City, Ponce City Market Atlanta, Assembly Food Hall in Nashville immediately. But let's take a look at how food halls came to be important, because I think it's necessary to have some context here in evaluating their role in the evolving retail environment. This is not a passing fad. We believe very strongly that food halls are symptomatic of changes in the food culture here in the U.S. and in other countries, and in how and where we consume food. So what about food halls? Where did they come from? Everybody knows about food courts, but what are food halls? Well, there are, in our opinion, 8 inspirations for food halls today. The first inspiration have been old public markets, and these old public markets were already in existence. They evolved to become food halls. Much of the time, the original design and layout are retained. So if we think about Farmers Market in Los Angeles next to the Grove, Grand Central Market in downtown Los Angeles, the Central Market in Denver, Pike Place Market in Seattle, Quincy Market in Boston, St. Roche Market in New Orleans, one of the really old ones, Mercado San Miguel in Madrid. These were all public markets, and over time they've basically gone upscale and gotten more sophisticated, and the curation of vendors has increased considerably. A second inspiration for food halls were old food courts. Basically, in old regional fashion malls and super regional fashion malls, there was almost always a food court. Sometimes office towers had food courts as well. And in some cases, these have evolved so far that they aren't really food courts anymore. They've become food halls. And this has involved a lot of upgrading in terms of materials, fixtures, furnishings, overall layout, design, and curation of vendors. So some examples would be Century City Mall in Los Angeles, 7th and Fig in Los Angeles, San Francisco Center, San Francisco, and if we want an office example, the Willis Tower in Chicago. A third stimulus for the food hall was an adaptive reuse strategy to take an old factory, an old warehouse, an old aircraft hangar, old army barracks, old railroad terminals, or in the case of Ghent in Belgium, even an old church, and convert them into a food hall. In most of these cases, the original walls, floors, and ceilings have been retained, and the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, as well as HVAC systems, have remained exposed. In many cases, these conversions have a certain gritty texture to them, but they do have this sort of feeling of authenticity in the perception of many customers. So one thinks of Chelsea Market in New York, Ponce City Market in Atlanta, the old Sears regional headquarters and warehouse for the southeastern U.S., Union Market in Washington, D.C., Stanley Market in Denver, an old aircraft manufacturing plant. The ferry building in San Francisco, originally a transportation terminal. The packing plant in Anaheim, an old citrus packing plant. Reading Terminal in Philadelphia, which was a railroad terminal. And bottling department at the Pearl in San Antonio, which was, as the name might imply, a former bottling operation for soft drinks. A fourth inspiration for the modern food hall were restaurants that have basically evolved, enlarged their space, and added a food hall, and sometimes certain decorative elements cosmetically in terms of signage, finishes, fixtures, materials to augment their regular operations. So if we think of the Press Waffle Company, which has various locations, the Riverside Food Lab in Riverside, California, the Windmill Food Hall in Carlsbad, which originally was next to Pea Soup Anderson's restaurant, El Palacio de Juegos in Miami. These are all examples of food halls that kind of grew and morphed out of restaurants. Fifth inspiration has been what I'll call the build to suit, brand new project, build from scratch. The Exchange in Dallas, the AT&T Center is a good example. So is Hudson Eats at Brookfield Place in New York City, in Manhattan, or the Junction in Denver. Denver has a couple of these actually, Zeppelin Station and the Grange in Denver, as well as the Milk Market and Milepost Zero and the Dairy Block are all new projects. The Assembly Food Hall in Nashville, Playa Provisions in Playa del Rey, the Battery in Atlanta, the Mix in Costa Mesa, Legacy West Food Hall in Texas. These are all new projects. The Public Market in Embryville, which has changed its name and added Public Market to it, is not actually an old public market. It's a new project, but they decided that for branding purposes that calling it Public Market was going to be much more effective than the previous name. The sixth inspiration for food halls is the department store. Many famous department stores in the past had a food section or some food aisles, and produce was offered for sale there. And over time, these sections have often grown into a food hall. So if you think of Harrods in London, if you think of Fortnum and Mason in London, you think of KaDeWe in Berlin, the main Galeries Lafayette store in Haussmann in Paris, the Palacio de Hierro store in Polanco in Mexico City, the Rinascenta store in Rome in Italy. These are all former food sections that have morphed into quite large food halls in these respective department stores. Seventh inspiration has been the chef-driven food hall. It's a somewhat smaller category. A good example would have been the Todd English food hall at the Plaza Hotel in New York. It did, however, not survive the COVID pandemic and closed, but there are several of these in Las Vegas. Various and sundry chefs in the attempt to experiment with new menus and new offerings, new culinary treats, find that food halls are great laboratories for experimenting before they invest in the cost of a brand new restaurant. And finally, the eighth inspiration has been the case of smaller shopping centers that have morphed into food halls. Were essentially the entire shopping center, and these have generally been small neighborhood shopping centers, convenience oriented, and have become food halls. So if you think of the Far East Plaza in Los Angeles or the 4th Street Market in Santa Ana, California, these former small centers have totally converted to food and beverage and are food halls. So what makes for a successful food hall? We've talked about the inspiration and where the food halls came from, what their DNA is, but what do they need for success? Well, there are a lot of variables that go into success. Some ones that are definitely important in our experience would be, you certainly need a good site. Site selection is still important. If you have a location that has very poor access, it has very poor visibility, it doesn't have any frontage or access to frontage on a major street, this is going to be a challenge. The proper operational model is extremely important, and we will come back to that because there are some basic operational models to choose from, but they don't all have the same criteria and they don't all yield the same results. Uh, Design remains important because at the end of the day, the food hall is attempting to offer an experience that the customer can't get somewhere else. So this is different than dining at home, different than going to a fast food franchise, different than going to a food court in a regional fashion mall, different than going to a restaurant. Food halls attempt very, very clearly, at least the successful ones, to deliver an unusual and unique, memorable, and even Instagrammable experience for the visitor and the customer. So design that enhances the memorable aspects of the visit is certainly very, very helpful. And this is often a matter of details. You may have a great location, but if you don't have a good design, the food hall is going to struggle. Food halls tend to use the latest and greatest of modern technology. They tend to be very much on the cutting edge of technology. This is important for a couple of reasons in terms of keeping costs down, keeping the price tag for customers at a modest point, but it's also important for the efficient use of space in a food hall. Most food halls don't have an unlimited number of square feet or square meters that they have to operate within. There can be sharing of a lot of facilities and even sharing of certain equipment. There can be sharing of food lockers for pickup and takeout. So use of technology, very, very important. Also important in the success of food halls are vendor curation. This particular variable can't be stressed enough. This is not a case of, well, we have space and let's just fill it up as fast as we possibly can by anybody who can meet our rent and lease criteria. A food hall to be successful has to offer a wide variety of dining and culinary experiences for the customer. That means that a lot of different kinds of food is required. It's difficult to have a successful food hall if you have 20 taco vendors all selling tacos. And while there's a great variety in the kinds of tacos that can be prepared and the kinds of salsas and spices that are used and the ingredients that go into tacos, nonetheless, food hall is going to be a lot more successful if it also is offering Italian food and Japanese food and Chinese food and other food groups, and not just, for example, Mexican food, or not just burgers, or not just pizzas. And finally, a really important variable, and probably the one that in our experience gets overlooked the most and has contributed to definite failures of food halls that we're familiar with, is programming or space activation. This can be live music. It can be a variety of concerts. It can be other kinds of shows and activities. It can be comedy shows. But the appeal of food halls is, yes, food, beverage, place for socialization. People come together. But it's also entertainment. And wow, dining can be very entertaining, and watching other people buying food, carrying it around, and consuming it can be entertaining. The most successful food halls also have programs and events and activities that they put on, and they have a dedicated space where this can happen. Now, where this happens is variable. If you go to the packing plant in Anaheim, it's a 2-level indoor enclosed project, and their performance space is right in the middle of the building between the 2 levels adjacent to the stairway. So it's easily accessed, easily visible from every point inside the building, and they have live entertainment of one kind or another on a very, very regular basis. Pretty much every night. I won't say it's 365 nights a year, but they have a very, very heavy live entertainment program. So programming, space activation is also an ingredient. It's not just about the food and beverage. So to wrap this up, food halls are certainly much more than just places to eat. They've become living traditions. And secondly, they connect a lot of the world's food groups and food experiences in a rather unique environment, and this provides an entertainment experience for the visitor and the customer. Thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been helpful, and we look forward to seeing you in another video in the future.